Finally, on Spotlight on Education tonight, a very unique program that started here in Alabama. It deals with food insecurity among college students. An effort began at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and it is spreading now, and we're happy to tell you more about it tonight. Sippy Sridhar is the founder and executive director of Donor to Diner. Sippy, welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you determined a need at UAB among some of your own fellow students there about food insecurity. Tell us about the need that you saw there.
So food insecurity is when students don't have enough food, or really any individual does not have enough food and struggles to get food on a regular basis, might have to forego meals because they just don't have the resources they need to eat every meal. And so we are all familiar with food insecurity, even if the term might seem new. Generally, we tend to associate food insecurity with people in third world countries, children especially, but it does happen here in the United States, sure. And it happens on our college campuses, and that's often surprising to a lot of people. I was very surprised. And so I came across this when my freshman year in college at UAB. We were required to have a large meal plan our freshman year, and being vegetarian and a picky eater, I didn't use my meal plan very much. And my friends knew this, and one day my friend approached me during lunch, and she discreetly asked me if I'd mind paying for a meal. I didn't, I was happy to kind of let go of some of my meals because I didn't want them to go to waste. Sure. And, I decided that, I talked to her more once we sat down and got our food, and she explained her situation to me and how she worked multiple jobs, one of which was to solely pay for her meals on campus. And she was doing all this while being a full-time student. And when I heard this, my heart sank, because no one should. It's hard enough to go through school, but to have to worry about eating, I just couldn't imagine that. And I wanted to do something to help. And for her individually, I had the meal plans, and it just made sense for me to take my meal plan and use my meal card to pay for her meals. And that's what I did for the rest of the school year. But it got me thinking, are there other students like her, or is this just something unique to her? And with some research, I found out that it was unfortunately very common, not only at UAB or in Alabama, but throughout this country and even this world. There are a lot of studies done in other countries as well where they talk about food insecurity among college campuses. And it's sort of a silent issue, and that's why people don't really know about it, even the students who are experiencing food insecurity, because college students are typically associated with being, poor and have struggling to eat, and there are these stereotypes of students who eat ramen noodles and can't necessarily afford very expensive foods like maybe like lobster or steak every night. But there's a middle ground of where students should be in terms of food. We should all be able to have a fairly nutritious meal 3 times a day, or more or less, depending on just how much food you need. And so there were resources, believe it or not, at UAB. I didn't know this. I had to do some digging, but I found out that there is a pantry at UAB, and they had case managers who ran it, who are essentially counselors. They talked to students and helped them through a number of issues, but food insecurity being one of them. And I realized that if I had no idea what this was, the chances are there weren't going to be many other students who knew about it either. And it seemed that the best way to change that was for students to get involved. Okay. But there wasn't a way at the time, and so I decided that I took it upon myself to change that and created Donor to Diner.
Now I want to take a closer look at a couple of things you raised there. Number one is that a lot of people probably are surprised to hear that this problem exists on college campuses. They may not be so surprised to hear that it exists, in K through 12 school. We hear about instances there, but I guess the assumption is among many people, if you get to college, you have some means. And while that may be true to some extent, maybe not as much so as we might like to think. And when you talk about I want to clarify too, meal plans, for those who don't know, many college students buy a meal plan card, and that entitles them to so many meals a day while they are students there, right? So were you under the impression too, I guess, at least initially, that that it was happening on a college campus? You look around, you see your fellow students, your friends, and you think they've made it to college, they must have some means.
Well, it's not something we think about. And, I was okay. I had food, and so I didn't really think that, maybe my classmates had this problem. It's just we kind of tend to assume our life is like everybody else's, and that's not always the case. And it's very sad, but we can make a difference. And so once I learned about it, then that awareness made a change. And that awareness has pretty much driven what Donor to Diner does, because once people find out about this, no matter who they are or where they're from, they can all relate to being hungry, because we all get hungry. And so I found that once people hear about what we do and the problem, they're all willing to help. And we've been flooded with support and donations, but it's getting the information out there and letting people know.
What you did at UAB was you said you found out that UAB had an existing food pantry where students who needed it could come and get non-perishable food items, canned goods, and the like. You took that a step further. I think you were actually sharing meal plans, were you not?
So we started off with the pantry. So it was very small. So it was like a tiny closet in an office. And so if one student went through, they'd pretty much wipe out everything that was there. And that would cause students to kind of hold back a little bit, because they wanted other people to be able to take advantage of the pantry as well. And so we expanded what was available. Now it's this huge room. They're adding cabinetry space because it keeps filling up.
That's
and
good.
They have like 2 or 3 storage spaces for the food, and they just bring them in as they get closer to expiration. So they have no need for donations because enough keeps coming in. So it's very stable. The pantry itself is very sustainable now. And then with the meal plans, the donation, I thought, I have excess. And talking to some of my friends, I found out that other people also didn't always use their meal plans. Either they're picky eaters or dietary restrictions, or for some reason, they weren't always using all their meals.
You're right. I remember back to my own college days, I didn't use all of my meal plan, and I look back now and I think what I could have done with it. And
so it created a way to make it possible for students to help each other. And so this program called the One Meal Initiative relies on, as the name suggests, one meal. So each person donates a meal at the dining hall at a given time each semester, and all those meals are collected and distributed to deserving students. And they can take advantage of a hot meal in our dining hall, which really means a lot to some of these students, because some of them are temporarily homeless, unfortunately. And I just think that's just scary. And it's amazing they still come to school, but they can't always use the donations in the pantry because some of them require appliances that they don't have access to. And the meals from the vouchers from the One Meal Initiative help them gain access to food as well.
More excellent points you're bringing up here. Even if they can access some of the food from the pantry, they might not have, say, a microwave oven to go heat it up in. And so it uncovers more layers, don't you think? There are more layers to this problem than we might think.
I learned a lot, because it's very surprising each step of the way as I learn more and more about this, and as I did more of this work. It's just incredible how strong people are, and we're just doing our part to help.
Now, UAB was very responsive to you, were they not, in helping you get this off the ground? In terms of support, you mentioned they've already expanded the pantry program. I assume you had to work with the school, too, in the meal plan sharing.
So we worked with the university administration, and we worked with Sodexo, they're the ones who sponsor the dining program. And so they were very responsive, and they're very supportive. And they've helped us with just developing all these programs. So it's been very good. And in addition, everyone within the university, including faculty members and staff members, students, everyone's donated and really helped as much as they could.
Now, you have graduated from UAB, and you're moving on now to the University of South Alabama, where you're hoping to create this program as well, right?
And so we're looking at creating a pantry, because South Alabama does not have a pantry currently, and it seems that they do have a need for it. And so I'm working with their department, the Dean of Students, especially Dr. Mitchell. They've all been, incredibly supportive. I'm only starting in the fall, but I made some great contacts, and they're all really willing to help. And so I'm excited to see what we can do there. And once we've created that pantry, we'll go from there and see what level of need there is at USA, and we'll develop programs accordingly.
But your idea at UAB has caught on. Other schools have jumped on board, have they
Yes,
not?
so we're working on developing chapters. And so when I originally created this organization, I had no idea it'd come this far. But we're on our way to becoming probably a national nonprofit, and so I've had students see some of our news coverage. Like I said, awareness is a huge deal in what we do, and so our advocacy efforts have included news and just news coverage, and people have seen this from all over the country, and so I've had students from other universities who see a need in their campus and want to do something similar. Particularly the One Meal Initiative has struck a chord with a lot of people because they can see it being very beneficial. A lot of schools do have some schools do have pantries, but this is a great supplement as well. And so some schools, depending on the school, some schools need pantries, others need this program, some want a combination of the two, and we're working with them to create chapters.
Did you ever envision this becoming a national nonprofit?
No, I didn't even see it becoming as big as it has at UAB. So I'm just, the goal was to help one person, and I'm amazed it's come this far. And I mean, I just want to see where this goes and keep doing what I can.
You brought up an interesting component in this conversation, and that is a lot of these people who could take advantage and benefit from these programs don't always come forward with their problem. Maybe they're ashamed, or for whatever reason, they don't say, hey, I need this help.
Because sometimes I think really the biggest thing is fall back on is that these students don't realize they can get help, so they think it's the personal problem that they have to handle themselves, but in fact it is a problem that they can ask for help and they can get resources. And so our coverage and our news coverage and our advocacy efforts, it does tell people that they can donate and tell people about this problem, but it does more than that, because it also tells people who are experiencing food insecurity that they can get help. And we've seen a larger number of people take advantage of the pantry and all of our other programs because they find out about what we do. And so when we like my members and I, we actually go out into the like our comments, the dining area, the dining hall, and we physically talk to students and hand out flyers before the event. And I've had a fair number of students come up to me and ask, I or a friend of mine, is going through this, where can we take advantage of these vouchers? And so we give them the information, let them know where they can go. So our advocacy efforts works two ways.
You also mentioned something earlier that struck a chord, students who might subsist on eating ramen noodles every day. Mm-hmm. If you're a college student and you know somebody that you see every day eating ramen noodles, it could mean a couple of things. It could mean, A, they just like ramen noodles, but B, it could be indicative of a deeper problem that you might want to try to explore with them if you can get them to open up to you.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes just handing them because most schools do have counselors who are trained to handle these kind of situations. So sometimes it might be just gently like talking about this issue and just handing them a card and letting them talk to somebody who they might feel more comfortable with, because it's generally it's a confidential appointment. And so most schools have this, and they can connect students with community programs as well. The reason we focus so heavily on developing programs within the university is that not a lot of students can access the community resources for a variety of reasons, whether it's transportation issue or distance or whatever it is. So it's nice to have something close by, and that really helps students out.
Now, people can help you in a number of ways. I assume that by contributing money, for instance, they can help stock these pantries at schools, right? Or if you're a student, you can actually donate part of your meal plan, right? So
we actually do not accept money currently because it creates tax difficulties, and so right now, I mean, as we expand, it'll eventually get to the point where we become a 501c3 and jump through all those hoops. But right now it's worked so well that we actually collect donations in the form of foods and whatever it might be. And for a lot of people, that's easier because it's hard to write a check for $5, but going in and buying something for $5, I mean, we all have different means and abilities, but we all can help. And so even if you decide to spend $2 on toothpaste, it makes a difference for someone else. And so a lot of people can donate in that way. It's to a pantry, to like a local pantry we're developing. We have one at UAB, we're developing one in USA. And our website will update on what schools have what available and where people can donate. But those who can't necessarily donate don't have to. They can still help. Like I said before, advocacy is a huge part of what we do. And so if people like us or follow us on Facebook and Twitter, that itself means a lot more than people realize, because as more people find out about this, the more change we can make. And in terms of students, students can get involved with the local Donor to Diner chapter, whether it's volunteering for an event or putting in donations through either going to the grocery store and buying stuff for the pantry or using their meal cards. Students can also create a Donor to Diner chapter if they see that they don't have one at their school but see this problem as well.
You mentioned the donation of the goods to these pantries. You mentioned toothpaste, so you're looking for things outside of basic food items?
So we take perishable food items, toiletries, and school supplies. And so a lot of people think when you think food pantry, you think food, but these toiletries and school supplies are very helpful as well. And as I mentioned before, some of these students are temporarily homeless, and so having these toiletries can really be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. And many of them, I assume, too, are maybe far away from home and can't reach out to friends and family so easily, right? Has that been your experience at the UAB?
That happens. Sometimes families can't help because we assume a certain level of economic stability, but not everyone has that when they go to college. And so some students want to improve their lives and want to pursue that American dream through an education. And so sometimes the families want to help, but they can't always help. It could be a rough time at home, and so it's a mix of things, and I think it depends on each student. It's really different, but in the end, everyone should be able to have a meal at home or at school. I mean, no one should have to skip meals, and that's what we're trying to change, because the motivation comes from the students. I can't imagine going through school like that, but they do. They're very determined people, and just a little plate of food can sometimes make things a little bit easier.
Well, again, key in this conversation, I'll go back to it, is something you just said, is that we sometimes assume a certain level of economic viability, given the fact that somebody has made it to college, but we can't always make that assumption, right? We don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
And I think before you mentioned how a lot of K through 12 students do get support in terms of food if they're in a certain income range. These students are used to that K through 12, and then all of a sudden they go to college and suddenly they don't have that support. And so we're trying to do what we can to make up for that gap. Before
we close, the name of the organization, Donor to Diner. Tell us a little bit about the philosophy there.
It was back towards the meal program. That's what I initially thought of when I was starting the organization. And the idea is that the food goes from the donor to the person who takes advantage of the voucher, the diner. And it took a few years to make that a reality, but I mean, it's been phenomenal since then. I mean, it was very surreal when it happened. And so I'm just very grateful for everyone who's helped. And I mean, we're just hoping to make this bigger, because we don't always think about just how important food is in our lifestyles unless it's missing. Sometimes the difference between a college student or a college graduate and a college dropout is one meal.
Yeah. DonorToDiner.org, right, is
yes,
the web
sir.
address. You're also on Facebook and Twitter.
Yes, under the same names. Our handle is @DonorToDiner.
@DonorToDiner on Twitter. Sippy Sridhar, the founder and executive director. It was a pleasure to have you on
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for what you've done.
Thank you.
And that does it for Spotlight on Education for this quarter. Thank you so much for watching. For all of us at Alabama Public Television,